I've noticed for a while now that folks talking about uh, dealing with toxic personalities or narcissists, oftentimes when they're talking about some aspect of that dynamic, some aspect of their behavior and, the toxicity of the relationship and so on, oftentimes there's this very clear parallel between the type of person they're talking about and government. And I've heard maybe a few people, I'm not sure more than a couple, mention this, but it's definitely not um, commonly pointed out. But it definitely should be because the parallel is real. I actually think basically most people in government are just narcissists with extra power. So that's why the parallel is so clear. So I'm just going to give a couple of examples because these just came up pretty much side by side to me just very recently when I was listening to some talks on narcissism. So I'll start with, they go together, so I'm not sure which is better to start with, but um, let's see here. Let's start with the title of a video that I just came across where, in describing the narcissist and something they oftentimes do, they said that the narcissist will rewrite history to avoid taking responsibility. So if you are aware of, politics and have any kind of a critical perspective whatsoever, you're probably aware that they do actually often literally rewrite history, Um, you may have heard that, the victor, writes the history books. The person that wins the war will write the history of the war. You often get a biased description of a historical event by the people who are writing the history, if they were the ones that, won, the ones that like conquered another nation or what have you, right? So and then of course there's like the Orwellian rewriting of history, as George Orwell talked about in his book 1984, and seems like we have happening more often now with um, information being digital, right? It's more easy to edit digital content. So, books being revised and so on in a digital manner, and it can be a way that uh, history can be rewritten in a way, whether the book is a history book or not. So there is that definite parallel. Um, the other talk I came across was talking about how narcissists hate boundaries. So this is a very common observation on these toxic personalities, that if you set a boundary, like if they do something abusive, they do something aggressive or deceptive, or they steal from you, and you tell them that that's unacceptable, they don't like that, right? The toxic personality isn't gonna say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that again," and then not actually do that again, right? That's what a decent person would do if what you are calling them out on is accurate, right? A decent person will probably recognize it if it is true, what you're saying, what you're accusing them of, and repent, apologize to some extent, and not repeat it, right? sometimes people do things that are disrespectful and they don't even realize it, right? Like it's not necessarily because they're intending to do it, right? And the difference with a narcissist type personality is that it is actually intentional and they don't ever really apologize. One of the talks I just came across was saying, like, these are top things that like a narcissist hates, like this is gonna drive them crazy, or however he worded it. And the main thing he emphasized was the boundary setting, but also going hand in hand with that, claiming independence, right? They don't want you to be independent from them, right? They want to have this ongoing toxic relationship where they're in control, and they even have this term called narcissistic supply, meaning like whoever they're victimizing is their supply. And there's a lot of varied kind of, I'd say, unclear explanation as to what this supply is really about. But I think it basically means that you're supplying them with a victim, that they're really operating on this demonic spirit that just likes to be abusive. So if you're supplying them with someone who can be abused by them, that's satisfying to them in a twisted way. So again, back to the parallel with statism or government, right? Independence is contrary to the whole idea of government. Even, in the so-called land of the free, right? If you actually wanted to be independent from the government, you would be immediately slandered, right? And this is exactly the same thing that happens with narcissists, right? They immediately, most of the time, slander the person if they say they want to get away from them and be independent. They might even try to use fear to keep them, like, oh, you can't live without me, or you wouldn't be safe without me, or people out there are even worse than I am, and these are actually all the same exact things that governments say. Returning to the rewriting history, I did want to mention the Civil War, because that's actually an excellent example of literally rewriting history, but also it's an excellent example because it shows that their main problem with other people is them becoming independent from them. So I have a whole playlist of videos on Civil War truth you can look at, but just to give a brief explanation of what the truth about the Civil War was, it's not simply just an issue of slavery as we're told, right? To give, again, just a brief explanation, Abraham Lincoln actually was quoted, and you can find these quotes, saying that, if he could preserve the Union and had to maintain slavery, he would do so. Like, he was more concerned with preserving the Union, with having the southern states that had seceded and formed a new country. He was more concerned with them being reassimilated than he was with slavery. So if you find that to be incredible, that's probably because history has been rewritten and you've been exposed to that rewritten history. But you can, like I said, check out the playlist I made, but also look up the Corwin Amendment, right? Corwin Amendment. So this was going to be the 13th Amendment, and it was ratified by many states if not all of the northern states. And the Corwin Amendment actually that slavery would not only be allowed, but it would be illegal to ever be abolished. So it was telling the southern states that your institution of slavery will be protected forever. We will never infringe upon your practice of slavery. So then the question is, well, if they were being offered this, I don't know what word to use, freedom. I mean, it sounds bizarre to say the freedom to enslave people, but if they were being told that we're not going to, interfere, the northern states, that we're not going, the United States federal government, right, we're not going to interfere with your institution of slavery. Why would these southern states still rebel and fight to the death, hundreds of thousands, right? This is the bloodiest war, right? If it was all just about slavery, does it make any sense? Try and forget everything you've been taught, but just think logically here. If it was all about slavery, why would they fight to the death in the hundreds of thousands if they were being told they could continue slavery if they just reassimilated? Right? Obviously, it was about more than that, and they said so. Again, you can do research and find this out for yourself, but it wasn't just about slavery. It was about independence. They just didn't want to be under the control of this federal authority. Slavery certainly was, an aspect of their position and their dislike, you could say, of certain thinking and policies that were in motion, but it wasn't actually the only and main issue, because if it was, again, why would they go through all of that horror, right? All of that death and destruction, if what they wanted was being offered to them for free, you could say, right? Without any struggle. If all they had to do was, bend the knee and return. So my point here being that this is a good example of how government doesn't like folks who want to be independent from them, right? Like, if a single state wants to secede and become an independent country now, right, it's considered, a bad idea, even criminal, or, the people that propose the idea are slandered, right? If you just want to be independent, if you say, you know what, I don't like this relationship anymore, and I just want to be independent, I want to be sovereign, you're going to be attacked. So, interesting parallel there, right? Because that's exactly what narcissists do, right? Like a lot of these folks are pointing out, this is something that narcissists absolutely hate, is you having independence. Like this guy was saying, the thing they hate the most is just to see you like live your life freely and happily on your own, right? Again, because they have a sick, twisted mind that enjoys controlling and abusing others, right? So if you're independent from them, they can't take part in that anymore. They've lost their supply, right? Just like government would lose their tax cattle, right, supply. They would lose the people from which they can extort money and also control. And so just to wrap this up, I'll hit back on the boundary thing again. Bodily autonomy, like I still find it incredible that people even think this is a debatable issue, like whether it's okay for politicians to make medical choices for you and your family. Like, that shouldn't even be a question. Like, it's just ridiculous to my mind. I mean, I don't know how you could be so naive and so idolatrous, I guess is the word. Like, you wouldn't let your neighbor take control of your body and your children's body. So why would you let the most historically violent and least trustworthy people do that? Like, it just, it just shows this appeal to authority and this idolatry. It's just like this belief, like, oh, whoever's the most rich and powerful and claims to be the authority must be the most trustworthy and ethical people. Even though that doesn't match history or common sense, it's just this, naive idol worship that would throw away like a most fundamental boundary, right? Your own body, and saying, oh, whatever you want to put on my body or in my body, oh, go ahead. I accept your full control. My body is now your property. You have full on communism, full on abolition of private property, even the most fundamental form of private property, my own body, I give to you, my, my Lord and Savior. It's really making a god of these so-called authorities, and that's why I think idol worship is not too strong a phrase. And going back prior to the Civil War, the very beginning, the Revolutionary War, 1776, that period, that history has been definitely rewritten, particularly on the forming of the Constitution, which we're just led to believe, was carried out by the pro-independence revolutionaries, and the Constitution was just establishing these freedoms to protect us from tyranny, right? That's just not true at all. If you actually look into the history, particularly what Patrick Henry was about, who's marginalized and his activities minimized to simply being like a good speaker. They'll just say like, oh, he was a great orator. But his activities and speeches, along with George Mason and the other anti-federalists, they were against what the Federalists were pushing and basically just forced on the country behind closed doors, like secret meetings, this supposed like democratic kind of convention where everyone was on the same page and, the best ideas won. That's just not at all the case. A good book to read on that is called Hologram of Liberty. Another one is Lion of Liberty, the latter dealing with Patrick Henry in particular, but also a lot of relevant history. But again, it was actually very pro federal government control and power that was set up to inevitably gain more and more. And this became apparent very soon after. A very clear example of this is what's called the Whiskey Rebellion, which was citizens rebelling against new taxes, right? And so what was the Revolutionary War in large part about, right? Like taxation without representation, right? It was a rebellion against taxes, right? And so then when the new federal government was formed, they started imposing unjust taxes on the people again. And so the people rebelled. And then what happened? George Washington, who's made out to be like this, champion of freedom. The History Channel will show like photo, painting of him with, Benjamin Franklin or one of the other so-called founding fathers, always excluding Patrick Henry, right? He's not on any of the money either, right? He's not on $1, $5, $10, $20, $50, any of those. So George Washington actually gathered the newly formed powers he had, federal government, to form basically a military force against the community militias that were rebelling. So they put down, the militias that wanted to be independent from this taxation and from this abusive extortion. And so history is rewritten, though, because did you even hear about the Whiskey Rebellion? Have you even heard much of anything about Patrick Henry and the Anti-Federalists and all of the debates they had against the Federalists and why they were opposed to the Constitution? Probably not, right? And again, that's because they rewrite history so that they don't have to take responsibility, as the video title on the Narcissist put it, but also so that they don't get exposed for who they are, which is abusers, right? Who are not pro-freedom and not pro-independence at all. They actually don't want people to be independent and free. Like I was saying, when the southern states seceded, right, they became independent. So it was actually another country at that point. So even the title of the war, Civil War, is misinformation. That's even a rewriting of history, because a civil war means two groups within the same country fighting one another. But the southern states had seceded, right, formed a confederacy. It was a different, separate country at that point. And the so-called Civil War was actually to force them back into union with the northern states. That was, again, the main reason for the war. So this tendency to just hate people being independent, again, just shows this really twisted mentality. And on the interpersonal level, you can observe this with toxic personalities that just go out of their way to mess with people. Someone's just minding their own business and they just have to mess with them one way or another, right? They have to be aggressive. They have to do something. They have to give them some angry stare. They gotta crowd them, or say some slanderous thing. They just have to mess with people because they just got this crazy abusive mentality, this wicked spirit, I think, largely in control of their mind, which is toxic. That's why another term used, or another label, is toxic personality. But that's what it is. That's what's going on the larger scale. It's just people are so indoctrinated to believe that, oh no, these are actually people helping you out, and never mind that the whole basis of their existence is extortion, and never mind that they're constantly doing abusive things, never mind that they're constantly two-faced. That's another thing on the interpersonal side you'll come across with narcissists, is that they're very two-faced for the purpose of keeping the relationship going, right? Because if they just showed you their true intent, you would leave, right? So they gotta put on a show, right? And politics is largely, if not completely, a show. And so we got this theater going on where they're acting as if they're, on your side. But that's just to keep you in that dependency and keep you supporting the relationship and, keeping the relationship going so that you won't think about having independence from them. All right.